On today's episode of Locked On Mets, I'm going to discuss the biggest subplot to this offseason that no one is talking about when it comes to the Mets. What are they going to do about Jacob DeGrom's contract as he is due for an extension with an opt-out following the 2022 season?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first to listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now on today's show, I will be talking about Jacob DeGrom's contract from all angles. In the first segment, I want to talk about how he came to terms with the Mets on that deal and how the Wilpons really screwed him in that deal and limited him from his full earning potential. In the second segment, I want to talk about how DeGrom is paid compared to some of the other top pitchers in baseball, what an extension could look like if the Mets were to come to terms with DeGrom this offseason. In the last segment, I'll give you my verdict. Should the Mets go out of their way, even though he's not due for one necessarily, to make sure Jacob DeGrom's locked up long-term this offseason? Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. And I actually wrote a piece about this very thing. What should the Mets do with Jacob DeGrom's contract? DeGrom is coming off a year in the first half where he put together the best string of pitching you might ever see. I mean, he carried an ERA of 0.67 into July. You look at all of his starts, he allowed one earned run or less in each start through his first 13 until the final two. In those last two starts, he struck out 24 batters in 14 innings, gave up 5 runs, hardly a bad performance, but that was the only thing that could take his ERA over 1. We talk about the offense. The guy hit almost every game, hit over 360. He was responsible for 10 runs of Mets offense while allowing only 11 earned runs. He was going to be the MVP this year. He is, when healthy, in my opinion, if not the best player in baseball, certainly the best pitcher in baseball. And we saw the difference first half and second half with what the guy could do. He still finished top 10 in Fangraphs WAR despite missing the entire second half and only making 15 starts, a 4.9 FWAR. Ridiculous. So here is how the Wilpons screwed Jacob DeGrom, though, if you want to go back to the 2018 season. At the time, of course, Brody Van Wagenen is DeGrom's agent, head of CAA. He comes out very strong around the deadline, actually around the All-Star break, and he was basically saying, look, my client wants to remain with the Mets long-term, either extend him now or trade him. That was the line that was drawn in the sand. And if you really think about it, it's always been clear that Jacob DeGrom, from around that time up until he signed the extension, that he just wanted that long-term security. I don't think that we fully grasp how stressful it is for these pitchers to go out and perform when a massive contract's on the line. And I'm going to talk about Stroman throughout this offseason, but what he just did was remarkable. Bet on himself on a qualifying offer, took the ball every 5th day, made it through the whole season healthy, put up good numbers. Now he gets to get paid. Jacob DeGrom was in the midst of a remarkable Cy Young season, and that's what he wanted. He saw David Wright in his age 32 season have an injury that eventually cost him the rest of his career. You talk about Jacob DeGrom, when he signed the extension going into 2019, he was entering his age 31 season. He saw Matt Harvey's career derailed by injuries. So all he wanted was a long-term deal. All he wanted is that security. So he signs a deal the next offseason going into 2019 when his agent became the GM. So you also have that betrayal where you believe your agent is having these conversations with the ownership, trying to get you your long-term money, and then he takes a job and becomes your boss, and you still don't have the contract. DeGrom gets the deal, $137.5 million, $500,000 less than David Wright for the largest contract ever given out by the Mets until, of course, Steve Cohen bought the team and gave Francisco Lindor $341 million. So he gets that deal, and you think, okay, a great deal for DeGrom, right? Let's go through this contract a little bit. Prior to signing it, the Mets had already agreed to giving their ace the largest arbitration raise in MLB history. He went from $7.4 million in 2018, wins a Cy Young, gets $17 million, almost a $10 million bump. That was more than Mookie Betts got, I believe, after his MVP season in arbitration. So DeGrom has a guaranteed $17 million going into 2019. Instead, after signing the deal, he brought home $12 million. He made less money based on the restructuring of the contract because his base salary went to $7 million. He still got the full 17 because he got a $10 million signing bonus, but $5 million came to him in 2019. $5 million came to him in 2020. So for the Wilpons, they saved $5 million while handing out the second biggest contract in franchise history. Once again, we see how cheap they really are. And it gets even worse because of that contract, all that money, right? The deferrals is $52.5 million. So really, if you're talking about in the short term what DeGrom is going to get paid, you're only talking about $85 million over those 5 years. Now you dive even deeper for a franchise that was about to be sold, as we learned later on. 2020, what was DeGrom supposed to make? Not a ton, because you look at his contract, and I want to get these numbers right here. So he was supposed to make $23 million, but 11 of that was going to be his base salary for the year. 12 million of it was once again deferred. So had DeGrom played out the 2019 season where he became a back-to-back Cy Young winner, and he played that out, right? He'd be looking at $25-30 million maybe in arbitration. Back-to-back Cy Young winner. Instead, he goes from making 12 altogether the first year. Then his second year, he's supposed to make 11. It's the COVID year. So that gets reduced to a little over $4 million in prorated salary. Luckily, he did get that $5 million from that second half of his signing bonus. So he makes over $9 million in 2020. But all of that is to say that Jacob DeGrom has not gotten paid over $20 million until this past season, where he got exactly $20 million as $13.5 million of his $33.5 million base salary was deferred. So you look at all of that, and here is a guy who has been the best pitcher in baseball since 2018, and he hasn't been paid like it. And the Mets have to decide where they go from here when it comes to paying DeGrom, because he's certainly worth more than he's getting, and he's also not getting anywhere near the going rate for his services compared to other pitchers in the league. I'm going to talk about that and also dive through some of the other math when it comes to his contract in just a minute. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back for the start of another football season. And as always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With the new updated site and interface, there's now even more odds, props, and contests available at betonline.ag, which continues to be your number one source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 100% welcome bonus on your initial deposit with the promo code NFL100. That's double that initial deposit. From football, basketball, baseball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Spotify Green Room is the first social audio platform made for sports fans. The app is free to download, and once you're in, you can talk with me, other fans, athletes, and insiders in real time about your favorite team or sport. I'll be hosting my Spotify Green Rooms throughout the off season. I'll give you an exact date when I know what the plan is. We were hosting them during the games to watch the Mets in action, where you could join in on the conversation you listen to here every day. In the off season, I'll try to structure that in a way that you can talk with me and other guests who might be coming on the podcast. All you have to do is download the free Green Room app now, which is currently available on all devices. Create a profile, link your Twitter, join the MLB group for the latest league updates, and follow me at Finkelstein Ryan to be notified when my room goes live. I know you want to miss it. I can't wait to hear everyone's thoughts on the Mets. I'll see you there. Spotify Green Room, changing the way we talk sports. So when Jacob DeGrom signed that contract, it was clear that the motivation was to get that long-term money locked up. He wanted that generational wealth secured guaranteed money. That's what it came down to. He wasn't getting it up front, but there's a ton of deferrals. He's going to get paid into his 50s. It was about making sure that one injury couldn't cost him what Matt Harvey's career was cost when it comes to career earnings, where you have an injury that derails you as a pitcher and you can never make up for that lost salary. So I don't at all believe that DeGrom made the wrong decision by signing this contract, but it certainly limited his earning power compared to other people, because had he gone through arbitration, he would have made far greater salaries the last 2 years and he'd be a free agent. So he'd had the opportunity to get that massive deal. He would have been a free agent after the 2020 season. Let's look right here at the career earnings in total cash. That's a key caveat here for some of the other pitchers in baseball in DeGrom's league. And there's pitchers like Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg who also have contracts with significant deferrals that I've looked at, they've made less due to total cash as compared to a Justin Verlander or a Garrett Cole, who got more upfront money in their deals. You go to Justin Verlander. On this list, which is Verlander, Kershaw, David Price, Max Scherzer, Strasburg, Cole, and DeGrom, he's made more money than anybody. Almost $275 million in total cash earned. That's not including deferrals and other things that could come down the road. Clayton Kershaw, $251 million. David Price, over $216 million. Max Scherzer, over $139 million. A lot of deferred money there. He's going to be looking to cash in on a bigger deal as a free agent this offseason. Strasburg, right below him at 139. And again, a lot more money coming his way, not only in deferrals, but for the last, whatever it is, if there's still 5 more years, if I'm not mistaken, left on Strasburg's deal. Garrett Cole, through a prorated year where he did make his full $36 million. And then what he made this past year, and of course, accounting for arbitration years prior to becoming a free agent, he's made 84 or a little over $84 million in his career, $30 million more than Jacob DeGrom. Total career earnings in cash, what DeGrom has put in his bank account since he started pitching for the New York Mets, it is $54,159,998. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but when you compare that to the other names above him on this list, and we could have pulled up Chris Sale and a few others that would probably also dwarf DeGrom, it's ridiculous what he's been paid. He deserves to get a new deal with no deferrals, get that money up front. He should be paid for being the best in the sport. When it comes to this current contract, though, this is where things get pretty complicated, because Jacob DeGrom has that player option after next season. So the opt out, I should say. So he has that general security to go into next year, bet on himself, win a Cy Young, hit the open market as the consensus best player available, and get as much money as possible. Now, if he doesn't perform, let's say he gets hurt or he underwhelms next year, well, he can opt right into that contract. He'll have that one option that he'll play out. So that would be for the 2023 season. And then from there, he will have a team option that factors in. So it's $30.5 million for 2023 with $12 million deferred. So he'd be making $18.5 on the front end. And then he has a club option for $32.5 the Mets would then be able to pick up with $15 million deferred. So once again, you're talking about $17.5. Add it all together, what is that? That it comes out to, what is that, $30 million of, did I do the math right on that? 17.5 plus 18. No, 35. So $35 million over the 2023 and 2024 season if he ends up opting in and the Mets were to pick up that club option as well. So that would be the reason why DeGrom would be looking right now this offseason to grab his money, to say, you know what, I just had my first health scare since the 2016 season, really. 2017, he wasn't DeGrom, but he still picked up the ball for over 30 starts, has been healthy pretty much all the way through 2017. Then he had the 2 Cy Young years. And then in 2020, he didn't make every start because he did start to deal with some ticky-tack injuries, but it was a shortened season. And then this past year, we saw what happened. He's got to be worried at this point about getting that next contract. I'm sure it's on his mind. And this is a guy who in the past has talking about that desire to be with the Mets for his entire career. He's talked about how there's not many guys nowadays that stay with one team for their entire career, and he wants to be that. So if that's the case, if you want to remain a Met for the entirety of your career, the time is right now to leverage that opt-out clause and get yourself a deal. And if you're the Mets, I don't know why you don't do it, other than the injury concerns and the fact that you don't have to do it this offseason. You could always let this thing play out. And that's what I'm going to talk about in just a minute. Should the Mets risk it and let DeGrom play out this season, potentially opt out and hit the open market? Should they sign him now? And also, how much money will it cost to get DeGrom on a new deal, whether it's 5 years or more than that? We'll discuss it all in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about the best tasting protein bar ever. Did you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors that there really is something for everyone? Whether it's the coconut bar, cherry barcia, raspberry mint brownie, German chocolate, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, or my personal favorite, cookies and cream. If you haven't tried all the flavors, you can get a mixed box where you'll get 2 of each. You can see which ones you like best. These really are protein bars that taste like candy bars. They come covered in 100% chocolate. They're soft, they're easy to chew, and they're healthy. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar, but they're high in protein and high in fiber. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. So this offseason, Max Scherzer is going to be hitting free agency at 38 years old, and he might be the reigning Cy Young after another great year. We've seen a lot of pitchers now later in their careers have a ton of success. Verlander with the Astros. You have Kershaw, who is still pitching well this season before getting hurt. And then, of course, Scherzer, like I said, potential Cy Young winner, a guy that's about to cash in on a contract that I would imagine is going to be a very high average annual value over 3 or 4 years, I would think. I would not be surprised at all if one of the first news items of the offseason is the Dodgers have agreed to sign Max Scherzer to a 3-year, $120 million contract, and he's getting $40 a year to pitch into his 40s. I mean, it would not shock me at all. For his age 38, 39, 40 season, I mean, the guy's been that good. So that is the groundwork of the type of a contract we're talking about. You can also look at Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole, of course, much younger when he hit free agency, when he signed his deal with the Yankees, but got a 9-year deal. None of this deferral, none of these stipulations, no nothing. It was just a right down the middle. You're the best pitcher on the market at the time. Argument, best pitcher in baseball after a really big season with sticky substances. Did I let that slip? I might have let that slip. Oops. Didn't intend to talk about all the sticky substances Garrett Cole was using with the Astros that made him the most dynamic pitcher in baseball. But I digress. Mike Scott, Garrett Cole gets this contract from the Yankees. I think he also, I don't know the score right now, the wild card game, but I know the first inning he gave up a bomb to Bogarts for a couple of runs. Worth every penny. Anyway, Garrett Cole, $36 million a year. He gets that every single season for 9 years. So a very uncomplicated contract compared to DeGrom's, where he's getting paid a lot more than DeGrom. So with all that said, if we're talking about what DeGrom is worth, 5 years, $200 million is not crazy. It's just not. $40 million a year for the best pitcher in baseball for 5 years. You basically throw away that last contract. I think Steve Cohen is someone that doesn't need to defer contracts, and that might be more attractive to DeGrom to get some money up front. He's going to have some coming to him on the back end. Maybe he likes the deferrals. Maybe he wants that down the road. Maybe he likes the Bobby Bonilla plan. Even if that's the case, generally the framework I could see is something over 35 and at max, around 40. And I would think you'd be looking at like a 5-year deal, which would take DeGrom pretty much all the way through his 30s. If that was the case, you're talking about something in the range, like I said, $200 million, maybe on the lower end, 175. And who knows, maybe he wants the deal so much that you can get him at a little bit of a discount right now. Maybe it is 5 for 175, 35 a year. Maybe you get a nice little signing bonus on that. I mean, that could be what we're looking at here to get Jacob DeGrom locked up in the blue and orange for the remainder of his career, or at least until the twilight years where, who knows, maybe he would take a more team-friendly type contract at the back end, depending on how he's pitching, to remain with the club and fulfill that prophecy of being the next Met to go wire to wire, play his entire career with one organization. You're talking about, unless Carlos Beltran gets in as a Met when it comes to the Hall of Fame, which is certainly a great possibility. If you look at his numbers, he was a better Met than a Royal. So that could happen. Beltran could be the next Met with that cap going into Cooperstown. DeGrom's next, though. I mean, DeGrom is, at this point, with what he's done, you're talking about a 7-year prime to get into the Hall of Fame. His starting in 2014. He just went to 2021. Granted, didn't have the best 2016 season with injuries. And then once again this year, injuries hurt him, but he was historic before the injuries. He's getting very close to being a Hall of Famer. If he pitches close to himself for the next 5 years, I believe he's going to be in. So if that's the case, and you're talking about securing your next Hall of Famer, securing that piece of history, fixing what you screwed up the last time around with Tom Seaver, you can't run the risk of DeGrom being unhappy. So I'm not saying the Mets should go out of their way to pursue an extension, because you know what? If Steve Cohen has the money, you can let this thing play out. There's a lot of uncertainty right now going into next season. DeGrom could go out, get hurt. Then he could opt into the contract. You have a club option. All right, you don't have to worry about Jacob DeGrom until you're heading into the 2025 season. You're fine. But if he comes to Mets brass at some point this offseason and just kind of says, I'd like to talk about an extension, considering what this guy's already sacrificed, considering what he's done for this franchise, considering the fact that he is the unquestioned best player on this team who completely changed the entire landscape of this past season. When DeGrom's on the team, you're in first place. When he's off the team, you're one of the worst teams in the National League. That guy's worth every penny. So this is a really interesting subplot that I don't think people are talking about enough right now, that Jacob DeGrom could be due for that extension, because that contract is complicated and he has a way to get out of it after next season. And I just personally would not want to see that, because if the Mets have another bad year, the media is hard on everybody. If things look like they're not going the right direction and DeGrom wins another Cy Young and he can opt out and try to win a World Series for another team, or another team throws a huge bag of cash at him with a plan to get to that World Series, and maybe he just decides, you know what, I want something else. I'm done with this circus in New York. That's not something I'd be willing to risk. So we'll see what the Mets decide to do with DeGrom this offseason. It's certainly something we'll be paying attention to here with Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, why don't you check out the Locked On Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Get daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team favorite picks, and Lee Sterling's lock of the day by subscribing to the Locked On Bets podcast, brought to you by BetOnline.ag, wherever you get podcasts.